Zohran Mamdani, the sleeper candidate who upset the New York City mayoral race, handpicked by AOC. This is bringing to the forefront, which is something that has been going on across the country, but now is front and center in American politics. This is the relationship of the US and Israel. We've also seen this more broadly in some things that have been said by Thomas Massie and by Marjorie Taylor Greene. It looks like this vassal state situation that has been in existence since the inception of Israel may be unwinding. And this is somewhat related to stuff that we've talked about last week when the Iran Israel war first broke out, of exactly what might be happening with Trump unwinding or diminishing the relationship between the two countries. Lucas, I know you've been watching this pretty closely. What are your thoughts here initially on the results of the race? I personally, I think that this is partially the rise of the new faction in the Democratic Party. There's large disaffection with the establishment leadership, and this looks to me like the changing of the guard, but it's got this backdrop of this Israel situation.
Well, I mean, apart from Mandani, the first that I saw him actually was a clip of him answering a question with regards to put to all the candidates as to where they would visit if they could go anywhere around the world. 4 of them said Israel, and he said, I'd stay right here and I'd take care of New York because New York has problems, which is absolutely the correct answer, no matter what politician you are, wherever you are at.
Yeah, but that's a way to dodge a question that you don't want to answer, and you don't want to answer it a particular way, so you give a pat answer. This is a technique candidates use, so I saw it for what it was. He didn't want to say the same thing everybody else was saying, and he also didn't want to say that that would be the last place on earth you'd ever catch me. So he gave the answer, well, I'm a New Yorker for New Yorkers. That's a way to dodge it, man. I'm not going to give him a pass on that one.
I mean, well, it's just the absolute correct answer. He is a Muslim. He is an immigrant. I'm not sure how long he's been in New York, but he grew up in Uganda, and his family had immigrated to Uganda from India. So very cosmopolitan. Shouldn't surprise us about New York, although maybe not uh, the mayors that we've seen in the line of Ed Koch and I can't even think of the rest of it, Bill De Blasio, et cetera, et cetera. Um, the main thing that caught me with Mandani is his avowed socialism, communism, Marxism. Um, you know, we many people sort of throw those all into the same basket. They mean any number of things, but he is motivated um, by equalizing pay and wealth in America. I should say he seems to be motivated by equalizing wealth in America, and I have expected towns, cities, especially, to take the charge in that movement because our government is structured in a way to give them tools that the federal government does and the state governments maybe have to a lesser extent, but the federal government certainly doesn't have.
I
Um,
don't see the mainstream media taking as much issue with this, or at least this isn't what's being raised up. To me, it seems like what's happening with his candidacy is that the situation I described is more at the forefront. Why do you think the socialism aspect is more important than like this broader narrative? Because most of what you see in the reporting about Zoran as a candidate is anti-Semitism. The Jewish issue is being brought up pretty repeatedly. I mean, do you think that that's sort of bluster and that the socialist aspect is the more important one? Because it seems like the national narrative is kind of going in this direction.
well, I think I have expected a reset in the Democratic Party, and we saw the Democratic Party um, ignoring the sort of its claim to values with Hillary and Bernie. We saw it in the last election, in turning again away from Bernie, and towards Kamala Harris, and towards candidates who were more concerned with foreign relations than domestic relations. But when I say, well, one, the Democratic Party has always been the party that was more powerful in states, that had a tighter relationship with unions and worker labor movements in the United States. So this is big. That that he's so popular, and that he is flouting some of the traditional power base, and the power structure of the Democratic Party. We're going to see more of it. We're seeing more of it, from the likes of Gavin Newsom in California, but that's sort of against Trump. But I also think that his lean towards socialism, Marxism, communism, I'll just throw them all in there together again, is very interesting, as we have Donald Trump, who is a not a traditional Republican either. And I say that with regards to his tariff policy, because that is a great departure from the 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 longtime Republican policy of free trade around the world. And if not free trade around the world, using American military power to secure preferential trading relationships with other nations.
I'm gonna still say that this Israel thing is the more important one. You know, there could be this backdrop of the economic issues, but this is what's being put in front of the American people. We've got Thomas Massie talking about AIPAC having the strings on most of the Congress people in both the House and the Senate. You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene coming on Tucker Carlson saying that there's an outsized influence of Israel and AIPAC on the Congress. We've got Zohran, being brought forth, and his stance towards Israel being repeated by most of the media. I mean, this is what's being put at the center of the discussion currently in front of the American populace. Fox News is running stuff on Iran. It sure seems like either there's an attempt to whip up the American people to get interested in a war with Iran, or that we're finally going to see a hard break. And I just can't imagine that this issue isn't one of the main ones. And I think that that's why that question was brought up, is they were intending to trap him in an answer to something that would result in him not getting the nomination in the mayoral race, because you had every other candidate up there essentially towing the line of what AIPAC wanted them to say. And so now we're starting to see major political figures from both sides, Democrats and Republicans, starting to take a stance against this. And I think that this is one of the things that's going to start to cause a strong divide within the Congress. We already had a very divided Congress, and now we've got the vote on the big, beautiful bill, kind of trying to be reconciled. And we've got players from both sides defecting against this thing, and largely it seems like this is where the political discourse in America is dividing right now. It's about whether the politicians particularly support Israel, which direction they're going to go, and whether we're going to keep sending money to support Israel when there are a variety of things that are going undone in our country. And it seems like there is not appetite for this. Trump largely ran on a pro-peace initiative, yet we're bombing Iran, and we're supporting Israel in this. And there are mass defections within MAGA saying this isn't what we signed up for with this presidency. So now this issue is being brought to the forefront in one of the biggest political races that is happening prior to the midterms.
Well, it's a political race in a city that has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. But all that aside, I think that the question of his support for Israel, or his religion, or ethnicity, his Muslim religion or ethnicity, however we want to categorize that, I don't think that's the big issue here. And even when you bring forth this, I mean, there is this narrative of the power of AIPAC. I don't think Ted Cruz was wrong when he said AIPAC has less power than is given it. Now, I also agree with Thomas Massie, and I think that that it operates with the interest of a foreign of a foreign country, and it should be registered under FARA. But Israel serves American interests, or at least the interests of some people who think this is how America ought to operate. But I don't know how much longer American imperialism is going to be focused on Western Asia. I'm afraid that it's moving to Africa and maybe to Canada and Greenland, with concerns about the Arctic coming forward. We'll see how that plays out. I I I know that we haven't put to bed, um, uh, how do I put this? The neocon desire to go to war with Iran. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't. I think that there will be um, a. I think that conflict will continue in some capacity going forward, but I don't know how strong Israel is, and I think that the focus is very quickly changing towards, a gold reserve in Saudi Arabia, and people needing to get along with what's going on there. So to me, what's really more important with Mandami is him talking about raising the corporate tax rate and having ideas like city-run, city-owned grocery stores in each of the boroughs, and that is a much stronger um, uh, sort of turn towards socialism than we've seen before. And if we don't,
It just doesn't get people to the polls. I I hear you that these are impactful and important things that he's talking about. I mean, and I'm not necessarily going to say that we should. It's rare that you and I disagree on something so much like this, because I keep trying to steer us towards this, and you keep trying to steer us back away from it. So I'm pretty curious about this, and more I want to dig into it from that perspective, because I we've been hearing candidates in New York City races talk about rents, about various minutia. This is not usually what gets people motivated enough to get up off their butt and actually go vote, especially in a race like this. I mean, these are notoriously undervoted races. Even in New York City, I'd imagine that this isn't anywhere near the turnout that happens for, a high profile presidential candidate race. So usually we have limited participation in the midterms, and even less so whenever we're electing governors or mayors. So, to get people to actually vote in a primary, it's one of the least type of trafficked electional activities that happen. So I'm going to say that it's this issue. It's the protests that have been happening nationwide. It's what's going on in Gaza that has got people really interested in politics right now, and getting off their butt to go vote. If Zoran had only been saying, I'm going to freeze rents, and it was all about, how to bring down the price of shawarma on the streets of New York City by making it so that street vendors could get, less friction to getting their licenses, he would not have been a major candidate. It wouldn't have mattered. And it also wouldn't have mattered if he had been of a different persuasion. If he'd just been some normal white guy that didn't have any kind of an angle on this, it wouldn't have even been an issue. He wouldn't have gotten nowhere. The crazy dude that said the rent's too damn high had a lot of similar policies to what he's spouting. I mean, it's common sense stuff, but it's not what gets people to the polls. And so I don't think it's what got Zoran lobbed to the front of the ticket. It's his association with AOC this broader narrative of what's going on in the Democratic Party, and then it's this Israel issue, because this is what everybody is really concerned about. And so if you have somebody who's against that narrative that, hey, we're actually going to go to war and we're going to do this again, I think that this is where political candidates are going to find ways to find the support they need to get elected. So I expect to see this repeatedly in the upcoming cycles, and especially in the midterms. This is where the battleground lies.
Well, I mean, you could be very right, and I mean, I certainly think that American support for Israel is waning. People are beginning to grasp what has been happening with the conflict in Gaza and between Gaza and Israel. But I think what's actually more important that's happening is that we are stalling with the economy. We are stalling with American progress. I know Trump has talked and has tried uh, to restart the American economy, but he's again, the federal government is has more limited options, and I've been very, yeah, it's a horse, it's a dead horse that I beat over and over. But the states and the local governments are going to be the ones to respond, and the Democratic Party, when it remembers its history and it remembers the tools of local governments, is going to is going to reform. And remember, I mean, remember the nature of the federal government, and especially, like, states like New York. How does the federal government get states like New York, cities like New York, states and cities? How does the federal government get them to toe its line? It pays them off. But as inflation is a is something that is understood by all of the parties, that power is going to wane. And the especially the governments of large cities have the most social problems to worry about and to deal with. And we've seen that, we see that all the time in in videos of the homeless, in the home ownership rate of Americans, in the private debt that Americans accrue. Um, and so this is the front line of the economic battle, and Trump's tariffs only go so far, if anywhere at all. And as the big beautiful bill passes, also, I to
You
me.
see that passing. I think that there's significant problems for this. Like, we're currently under a filibuster in name only, where they're reading the bill. You've got quite a few people who are looking at the Medicaid cuts and saying, this is going to get me thrown out of office. I can't vote for this, and it breaks a campaign promise. I'd be shocked that this actually goes through. I think that they're going to kill this in reconciliation. They're going to make it so that this actually can't happen, because there is way too much stuff in here that is going to get many politicians in significant trouble. They vote for this, and essentially they're saying that they no longer want to be in office.
Well, regardless, I mean, I think you're right. But regardless, the trotting out of the idea and the policies of the big beautiful bill should be a warning to anyone who's holding American debt. And now we're starting to have politicians talk about defaulting, openly talking about defaulting, or at least not paying interest on reserves. I haven't heard anyone say let's not pay interest on bonds, but let's not pay interest on reserves. This is going to affect the desirability of purchasing more government debt. So if the big beautiful bill were even to pass, who would be purchasing the debt that was going to finance it? Probably only only Americans, and maybe only the
QE4,
president.
QE4.
Who?
I said QE4, quantitative easing. We'd be back to quantitative
Oh,
easing, where
I
the
mean,
Fed just buys its own debt back.
right. And so, you know, New York City has I mean, it's a financial center, but even before that, it has a large port, it has a large population. If it begins to toy with notions of socialism, and again, I'm very interested in the Hoover administration. Like when Donald Trump said, "Oh, I'm President McKinley," I said, "No, you're J. Edgar Hoover. Maybe Elon Musk is J. Edgar Hoover." What was important about the Hoover administration? They had many of the same problems that we have now. They trotted out some ideas that would later be adopted by FDR, but they were considered too socialist for the time. And the when everyone owes money to a private banking consortium, and we can't afford to pay even the interest on the debt, not that Hoover.
Oh wait, which Hoover are we talking about here?
President Hoover.
Okay.
Am I misremembering it? Who was president after Woodrow Wilson?
Herbert Hoover.
Yeah, Herbert Hoover. There we go. Herbert Hoover was a technocrat of his day and age, and came into office. Anyway, I don't know if you've heard Hoovervilles. Unfortunately, he has the reputation as being the president who was unable to stop the Great Depression from coming in. He tried, and he meant well, but anyways, he's.
So you say there are echoes of Herbert Hoover's presidency and what we're about to face here in the United States and Donald Trump. So you're calling it, this is the second Great Depression that we're about to fall into.
I mean, I don't even like the words "the Great Depression." I would say the Great Retraction is a better short summation of what occurred. And what there was a retraction was the amount of money, and that came because people no longer believed in the debt, in the financial instruments that were piled on top of each other. So if that doesn't remind us of the position that we're in today, I don't know of like something that has a stronger correlation. And if we think,
they're just going to shift all the debt into crypto, and they're going to just pile all those treasuries into stable coins. That's the next bailout for the U.S. government. Like every time the U.S. looks like it's on the brink, it just seems like it gets another free pass. And I don't know, with the passage of the Genius Act and what's going on in the world with stable coins, it sure seems like the dollar is being set up to get one more big bailout. So this can like get kicked down the road again for another few more years here. It's very likely impossible.
well, I think that it's maybe we ought to be thinking about the relationship between the strength of the dollar and the American economy and wars that occur in the world. Because if we think about the relationship between World War II and World War I and World War II and the Great Retraction, they have a lot to do with each other, and part of it is a failure of this economic model of relying on taking over other countries and taking advantage of their populations and their resources to sustain your way of life. And as we have a come to Jesus, in Western Asia, and we turn towards Africa, we should be thinking, do we really want to go down this path again and perpetuate a cycle on a whole nother continent, and a continent that has had a chance and generations to prepare to stave off a repetition of the same subjugation that occurred in Western Asia. So which maybe is a whole nother conversation. But regardless, leading into this political discussion we have of, are we going to give up amongst ourselves? Are we going to have a more equal distribution of wealth in America, or are we going to go to war somewhere else? That is the cycle of the political question that we're confronted with over and over. And Mamdani and his policies give us one alternative. The other alternative is to go take from Africa, or to try to retain our foothold in Western Asia.
I see these stable coins as some of the laziest companies I've ever seen in my life. It is the easiest way for them to make money with the fewest number of employees possible. If you look at Tether and Circle and everybody else, what are they doing with all of this stable coin issuance that they're doing? They're just loading up on the easiest rate of return in the world, which is to buy treasuries. It's this perceived risk-free rate of return. Whether it's actually a risk-free, I think will remain to be seen. Personally, to me, this has a lot of echoes of what happened in the Terra Luna ecosystem. Everybody was loading up into their 20% money market thing, and it was like, wow, let's just make money the easy way. Let's just put a whole bunch of money in here and just sit back and do nothing. To me, that seems exactly what is happening with the stablecoin issuance. They have a very easy way to go make 3, 4, 5% on their money, and they don't really have to do anything. And that allows them to ingest an incredible amount of the appetite for this type of currency, so that people can go trade in the crypto casino. And as more of that money onboards, it's buying up more of those treasuries. And so, to the extent that we have this desire for stable coins, and that the world is shifting into some sort of a blockchain based, we're doing a lot more stuff. This has the ability to delay this issue from being super important. Like, it could be a crisis if all of these auctions don't go well, but I see a lot of capital that wants to flow into the stable coins. And so if they're going to buy it all up, and there's a ability for this to get delayed by months or a couple of years, then this might not even be as big of an issue with the midterms. I think that it might be where this ends up being a delay. And so that's why I don't think it's as important of an issue in what drove the Zohran race. I really do think that this is a lot about what's going on in the Middle East and with Iran, and there being no appetite in the United States for fighting another war in the Middle East. I think that this is one of the things that all of the politicians are basically taking sides on this. Either they're having gotten money from AIPAC, and they're lining up on the side of supporting Israel and supporting another war and wanting to go to war, whether it be the neocons, Lindsey Graham, or any of the rest of the politicians who have really wanted a war with Iran for a really long time, and the people who are finally, I don't know, getting courage to speak out about this and say, we're not going to do this, and we don't want a repeat of it. And it seems like there are a lot of people across the United States who have been participating in the protests against what Israel was doing in Gaza, and this whole idea that Congress is controlled by Israel. And I've never seen anything like this in the political discourse of the United States. You were a fringe candidate if you said this kind of stuff before, and now it's on Tucker Carlson. I think that's the news there in my mind.
Well, it is amazing the realignment that is happening, and Tucker Carlson, the sort of ideas that he talks about, he and Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is also part of why I think some notions of like the equivalency between "Make America Great Again" and an American primacy are off base. And so some of the critiques of America First, Make America Great Again, I think don't understand the the I don't know how to put this, the resolve with which the American people are done or are tired of foisting their problems on other countries in the world. I don't know how that's going to hold, though. You did mention the Genius Act and stable coins as we begin to have politicians float the idea of not paying of defaulting on American debt, or at least not paying the interest on it. It's been very interesting to me that we have companies that have bought large amount of United States treasuries, and now we have something like the Genius Act, with which they are not compliant. And I'm not sure how they could come into compliance with it. We need to have a deeper discussion about this sometime. Um, but you know, if you were to look at this, if you were to look at the stock market crash of 1929, or the financial collapse of 2008, and say, hey, I wish that we could put this into some institutions that aren't backed up by the federal government, like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or aren't on Wall Street, like the New York Stock Exchange. If we could put those into some institutions that were not our problem and didn't affect a large number of people, wouldn't it be idea for it to make that the fall guy? But we'll see what happens there. I know we got to end a little bit early today. I don't know if you have anything more that you want to add, but keep an eye on Democrats and the rise of socialism in America.
And I think it might be a good idea for us to dig a bit deeper into the Genius Act. So maybe we'll have to do a follow-up where we pick this one apart a bit more, since it is looking to be maybe one of the only things that Trump really gets to pass in his presidency. But nothing more for today, and we'll see you next time on FOMO.
I did watch the congressional hearings for the Genius Act, and so I have some fun things to report from that, but in the future. See you again later.